started. Sponsorships, Dr. Paul Konigsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Konigsberg, Shimon Ruvain ben Levish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nisan Hara, Nisan ben Fardosa, Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael, Malcolm Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah Bet Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. The many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avramea ben Shimon, Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. A month of learning by Lynn Rappaport, in memory of her husband, Avram ben Sion HaKohen. Okay, today is the 27th, right? Okay. A Day of Learning by Ernie Bloom in memory of his brother, Yisrael ben Binyamin HaKohen. May the Neshamas have an Aliyah, Crank or Rafia Vater Shir Shema Tliya, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael a good Gaben Shtiar. Okay. I don't know what happened to Marvin. He's been joining us in the morning, but I don't see him this morning. Okay. Accordingly, we should, everybody should have been able to finish up a Memchet Amud Aleph and Beis, right? I'm just going to start, though, on the bottom of Memchet Amud Beis, about 4 or 5 lines from the bottom, okay? Where we're talking about Rabbi Shimon's ruling different from the rabbis. Okay? So he says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. He says, Zo divrei Rabbi Shimon. This was the view of Rabbi Shimon, the opinion of Al Chachamim Omrim, Reshut Echad, Meshameshet Lashtei Reshuyot. The sages, however, disagreed and said that one domain could be used, okay, by residents of 2 other domains, right? Basically, Reshut Echad. Ki Amrita Kamei de Shmuel, says the Gemara. And when Rav Yehuda said, I repeated this lesson in front of Shmuel, Amarli, this is what he said to me, right? And this is what our daf is for today, right? Is, right, 49 Aleph, right? Af so divrei Rabbi Shimon, okay? That even this view, which might be more stringent of Rabbi Shimon, okay, right, is really the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Aval Chachamim Omrim Shloshtan Asurot. But the sages say the 3 are forbidden. In other words, briefly recapitulating, you've got these 3 Chatzerot. Okay, Rabbi Shimon was saying 2 people from the outer ones can come in and eat with those in the inner one and then go bring their food back. Rabbis are saying you cannot transfer anything from any one of the 3 Chatzerot to any other one. Okay? Now, Tanya Kavate de Rav Yehuda, Aliba de Shmuel. And we have a Braita that supports the view of the statement of Rabbi Yehuda according to Shmuel. Amari of Reb Shmuel says, Rabbi Shimon Musari says as follows, Lamaha davar domeh. He said, what is it comparable to? And this is what he's giving the example. L'shalosh chatzirot haptuchot zo lezo. That you have three courtyards. Each one is open to the other. Uptuchot l'reshut harabim. And they're also open through another wall to the public thoroughfare. Irvu shtayim im ha'emtzait. The two outer, courtyards, each made an eruv with the middle one. Zoma v'ami toch beita v'ochelet. This one can bring food from her home in one of the outer courtyards to the inner one and eat there. V'zoma v'ami toch beita v'ochelet. And the other one from the other outside can bring, or theoretically, one from the middle courtyard could bring to one of the outer courtyards, right? Zo mechazarat muteret letoch beita, right? And and this one can bring it back to her home. Zo mechazarat mutara letoch beita, and the other one can bring leftover food back to her house or to his house, either way. But the sages say the three are forbidden one to another. And Shmuel followed his own reasoning. As we're going to see in a moment, what is that reasoning? Right? Namely, the Amar Shmuel. As Shmuel says, Chatzar shebein shnei mevuot. If you have a courtyard that is between two alleyways, right? So we have, look at the picture on the bottom of 49A1. There's the Chatzer, the courtyard, and there's a Mabui on either side. Now, to get from the courtyard out to the Reshus Harabim, you have to go through at least one of the Mabuis, right? So it may be that one Mabui may be more frequented, let's say, than the other one, right? So let's see what happens. It says our text, according to Shmuel, Chatzar shebein shnei mavuot, this courtyard that exists between two alleyways. Irva im shnehem, if the people of the courtyard made an eruv with those who live, other people who live off the same mabui, right? Asura im shnehem, they are forbidden with both. They are forbidden to use either one of the two mabuis. Lo irva im shnehem, if they did not make an eruv with the two mabuis, oseret al shnehem. In this case, it is prohibited with both. So, in other words, what we're saying here, right? Right. So that is the situation, right? So again, to review very quickly, irva im shnehem, if it said that he made a, right, joined a eruv with each of the two ones, he is prohibited. If he did not, lo irva, did not join an eruv with them, oseret al shnehem, it prohibits the residents, to carry of the other chatzerot, to carry in both of them. So one situation only prohibits what we'll call the in-between chatzera. The other situation prohibits the other people as well. Now, hayta be'echad regila u'be'echad eina regila. If one of the mabuis was more frequented and the other one was less frequented, zeh sheregila bo asur, that which is the more frequented one is prohibited. V'zeh she'ena regila bo, and that which is not is the less frequented, mutar. Okay, that is permitted, in which they can use that one. Okay, so that particular mabui, right? Amar Rava bar Rav Huna. Says Rava bar Rav Huna as a challenge. Okay, namely, irva im she'ena regila bo, if they made the eruv with the less frequented mabui, utar regila la'atzmo, he says, that those that are used to using that, okay, they can use it themselves. Va'amar Rava bar Rav Huna, and Rava bar Rav Huna says another situation. Im irva regila la'atzmo. Okay, if they made the eruv with the one that they are more, they do frequent more regularly. Zeh she'ena regila bo lo irev, and the one that they less frequent, they did not make an eruv with. Vehi, then the courtyard atzma lo irva, then the people in that in between courtyard, it's as if they made no valid eruv. Right? Dochin ota etzel she'ena regila bo. Okay, and therefore we have to encourage them to use the less frequent mabui in that case. Ukagon zeh kofin al midat stone, and doing so is very similar to people who apply the attribute of Sodom. In other words, it's a very miserly attitude. It's a negative attitude because you're forcing people to do something which is outside their normal routine, in a sense. Okay? Now, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So now again, okay, citing Shmuel again regarding the issues of courtyards. Hamakpid al eruvo. Okay, our scroll translated as one who's particular with his portion of the eruv. The language there is not, I think, as clear as Koren in the fact that, remember, we've been talking about the fact that people would use bread, okay, and they would combine loaves of bread together in one container to show their joint ownership of the area. So what about the situation of someone who is very miserly in terms of the portion of foodstuffs that they are putting in to the joint combined, and that's what eruv is, combined food package, let's say, all right, to establish the eruv. That's why I think our scroll is not clear enough there, okay? So if he is makpid al eruvo, he's stingy about the quantity of foodstuffs that he's using, okay? Ein eruvo eruv. That is not considered a valid eruv. Mashmo, asks the Gemara, on what basis is it? Eruv shmo, that the fact that itself is called a mixture, a combining. So in other words, there must be enough food in that combination, okay? So that there would be for 2 meals for the residents in that chatzer, in that courtyard, okay? Rabbi Chanina Amar, eruvo eruv. Rabbi Chanina says it is a valid eruv, ela shenikra me'anshe Vardina. But rather, he says, they're called to be like people like Vardina. And the people of Vardina was a community that was known to be very stingy. Okay, and again, that's the implication. So, a further statement. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda again in the name of Shmuel. Hacholek et eruvo. Okay, Eino eruv. Again, if he separates his eruv, and again, this time I think Art Scroll is a little clearer. They're saying he separates it by putting it in a separate utensil from that which, let's say, the common utensil, the common basket, whatever we're going to say. Eino eruv. In this case, it's not considered a valid eruv. Kiman, according to whom? Beit Shammai, according to the view of Beit Shammai. The Tanya, as it says, Chamisha shegavu et eruvan. If you had 5 people who collected and jointly put their eruv together, v'natnuhu b'shnei kelim, but they put it in 2 separate utensils. Okay? Beit Shammai omrim ein ze eruv. Beit Shammai says this is not to be considered a valid eruv. Beit Hillel omrim harei ze eruv. And Beit Hillel says that it is a valid eruv. Afilu tema Beit Hillel. You might even say that according to Beit Hillel, ad kan lo ka'amre Beit Hillel hatem, that Beit Hillel only said that it was going to be considered a valid eruv under those circumstances. Ela demalyan lemana ve'itar. Okay? That, in other words, there was so much food put together for the eruv that it overflowed, so to speak. It was couldn't fit into the first utensil, and therefore that's why you needed the second utensil for the overflow, for the extra. Okay, what was left over? Aval hecha depalge mifla, but where they specifically separated it, put it lechatchila into separate utensils, right? Lo, that's not acceptable. Okay, vitarte lamali, and 2. Okay, was saying why was it needed, right? Tzriche, we needed to say it. De'iyash me'inen hatam mishum dekapid, because if we had only said it was an issue of a person being stringent, aval hacha emelo, I might say in this case, with the use of a second utensil, it's not an issue. V'iyash me'inen hacha, and if I had only given the example of the use of more than one utensil to house the eruv, mishum depalge miflag, maybe it was a situation of they distinctly separated it. Aval hatam, but there, ema lo. But in the other case, okay, where we said, right, that it was leftover, or where we said, okay, that it was a difference, that it was being stinginess, that wouldn't be an issue, lo, tzricha. Therefore, we needed both statements by Shmuel to tell us his view of the situation with the eruv. Now, Amarle Rabbi Abba, the Rav Yehuda, right? So Rabbi Abba says to Rabbi Yehuda, okay, the following, right? Bebe Ma'atzarta, Bebe Rav Zakai, right? So he's telling him this episode, where they're discussing this in the wine press, the olive press, really, of the house of Rabbi Zakai. Mi Amar Shmuel. Did Shmuel really say, Hacholek et eruvo eino eruv, that one who divides up his eruv, his foodstuffs, it's not considered, if he separates it from others, it's into a separate utensil, it's not valid? V'ha'amar Shmuel, But didn't Shmuel say, Bayit shemanichin bo eruv, the house in which they establish the eruv, eino tzarich litain et apat, that house doesn't have to contribute its own bread into the eruv. Mai tama, what's the reasoning? Lav mishum de amar, was it not because he said, the kevan de manach basela, but since he said, okay, it's as if since he put the bread, okay, it could be that he has it in a separate basket, okay, because it's in whatever he baked it in, okay? Kiman de manach. It's as if he put it with them. Hachandami. Okay? Here too, we're saying that it's similar to that. Hachanami here too. Kevan de manach basela. Since he put it there, even though it's in a separate basket, it's still in the same house, in the same, let's call it area, of the rest of the foodstuffs. Keman de manach hachadami. It's as if like he put it with him. Arle. And he said to him, Hatam afal pi she'en pat ma'itama. But he said it as if he said that he didn't have to put any bread in there. So even if there's no bread, what's the reason? Okay? What's the point? The kulhu hachadaire. Why? Because it's as if all of them are living there. Okay? Amar Shmuel, Eruv Mishum Kinyan. And therefore we see that Shmuel says the establishment of the Eruv in that house is similar to an acquisition. It's as if they've bought a room, a section of that house, and that gives them the joint ownership, okay, to establish the Eruv. Okay, so now the Gemara wants to tell us, all right, something else, all right? Okay, so ve'im tomar, and if you want to say, mepnei ma ein konin b'meya, right? If you want to say that, ask the question, but is the house, I'm going to phrase it a little differently, is a portion of a house equal to a loaf of bread, okay, so to speak? On what basis can you say that you can buy a house? Maybe you might say, instead of bread, we need to use actual money, okay? And we need to use a coin of a certain value, okay? Let's say a ma'a, right? Which was a coin, okay, of significant value. It was a silver coin, okay? In any case, why wasn't that the case? Mipnei she'einam mitzuya ba'arvei Shabbatot. Why? Because we say that it's very possible that somebody might not have that kind of a silver coin, okay, available to them on the eve of Shabbos, right? Now, so we still go on and say, Heicha de'irev mihu liknei, okay? So therefore, we'll say that when the Eruv is made, if it's made with money, okay, so if they have the coin, let them use the coin instead of the bread, right? And consider that the acquisition. Gzeira Shema Yomru Ma'a Ikar, okay? We're concerned that the rabbis made a decree, lest one say that the coin of the realm, the use of real money, is the essence. V'zimnin delo shechiach me'ah. And there are times when very clearly one might not have available that particular kind of coin. V'lo ate le'eruve b'pat. And as a result, people will not come to make an eruv with the bread. The ate eruv le'ekil kol. And as a result, the practice of establishing the eruv will ultimately become null and void, will be forgotten, right? Now, in other words, if you make it difficult for people, okay, maybe they won't go to the effort, or they won't have it, and therefore they won't participate, and things like that. Okay, going on now. Rabba Amar, Eruv Mishum Dira. Rabba suggests, no, the principle of Eruv is one based on residence, okay, not acquisition. Okay, it's a symbolic residence, okay, in that location. My beinayu, what's the difference between the two of them? Ika beinayu kli. One difference between them is that of a utensil. In other words, if you don't have the bread, maybe you can say, fine, I will give you the container, I'll give you the basket, I'll give you the pot, I'll give you something to put the eruv in. Okay? Or another example, upachot mishava pruta. Another example might be that maybe a person can only contribute, instead of a whole loaf, let's say a roll, size of a roll, right? Or a size of a piece of pita, okay? Something like that. And that value of that bread stuff is less than a pruta. Or let's take another example, the katan, or we're talking about, let's say if it's a question of a minor that was used, he went around and collected the foodstuffs from everybody, okay, to bring it back to a particular house, right? So we now see the following. Okay, we saw that there were two possible explanations. According to Shmuel, part of the purpose of the Eruv, okay, is to reflect acquisition. According to Rabbah, the purpose of the Eruv is to reflect residence. So we're going to see the following. On top of Memtet Amud Beis. Amarle Abai le Rabbah. He says to Rabbah as follows. L'didach kasha, u'lishmuel kasha. Abai is saying, I have a problem with your answer, your explanation, and I have a problem with Shmuel's explanation. Okay? In both cases, all right? So, namely, ha Tanya, okay, haven't we been taught elsewhere in a Braita, Chamisha shegavu et eruvim, 5 people that gathered together and put their eruv, their foodstuffs together as an eruv, keshehem molechin et eruvan lamakom acher, when it occurs that they have to bring their eruv to another place. Let's say they're making an eruv, not just the people in their chatzer, but with another chatzer, or they're making that chatzer with the people that live off another mabui. Okay? Echad molech lekulam. The Braita says that one person can bring the eruv for all of them. Okay? If that's the case, right, what happens? Right? Hu nehu the kakani. Okay? It would appear then that only that one person who's bringing it is making the acquisition. Okay? V'tulo, and no one else. Okay? That was Shmuel's view, that it was acquisition. Hu nihu the kadaya. Okay? And it only appears also, okay, that not only is he only making the only acquisition, okay, but also he's the only one who is establishing some sort of residence, v'tulo, and no one else. Amarle, so Rabbah now answers him, Lola didi kasha, v'lola Shmuel kasha. No, there's no problem in my answer, and there's no problem with Shmuel's answer. Okay? Namely, shlichut dekulhu ka'avid, that person who is bringing the eruv to a new location, he's really acting as the representative of the collective, of the group. Amar Rabba, and Rabba then further says, okay, in a particular case, all right, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria, Amar Rav, Halacha Rabbi Shimon, that the law follows Rabbi Shimon, namely when we saw before our case of the 3 courtyards, okay, the law is not like the sages that prohibit any kind of transfer of items, but instead we say that one can go from one to the other, okay, from either the middle to outside ones to the middle, or middle to the outside, but not from, let's say, the furthest outside to the other furthest outside. Okay, we get now to a new Mishnah. Okay, our Mishnah now, in this case, is going to come back to the issue of the traveler. Okay, and what happens, how far can he go? What is the situation with a tchum for this person when it starts getting dark, right? Okay, Matnitin, our Mishnah is saying as follows, right? Misha ba b'derech, one who is traveling along the road, b'chashcha lo, okay, and what happens, right? It became dark, right? V'haya makir ilan o gader, and he knows, okay, this road, because he's traveled it perhaps other times, and he's aware that there's a certain tree or a certain fence, okay, ahead up on the road. And that location is actually about midway between where he is now and his home, which is his ultimate destination. Not only that, but the location of that tree or of that fence is actually within the tchum of his home. Okay? So if he's going to now designate that tree or that fence as his chum for Shabbat, what's the situation? Okay? Va'amar shvitati tachtav, and he says, my Shabbos residence is going to be under, let's say, that tree. Lo amar klum, says the Mishnah. It's as if he said nothing. However, if he says, shvitati be'ikaro, but if he says, my Shabbos residence is going to be by the trunk of that tree, mahalech mimakom raglav, he can continue going from where he's at that moment, va'ad ikaro al payamama, since he designated, and if he's within that tchum of that tree, let's say, he can walk the 2,000 amah and get to the tree. But that from that tree, he also, if that's his Shabbos residence, he has another 2,000 amah towards the other side of the tree, towards his home. Umi ikaro, and from the trunk of the tree, va'ad beito al payam amah. And if it's 2,000 amah from the trunk of the tree to his home, he has that 2,000 amah. Nimtza mahalech mishecha shecha arba'at alafim amah. If that's the case, we find that even once it's dark, he can still walk a total of 4,000 amah, 2,000 to the tree, which he designated as his Shabbos residence, and then from that tree, another 2,000 amah to his home. Now the Mishnah continues, however, in eino makir, o she'eino baki b'halacha. If the person does not recognize let's call it a landmark for the moment, okay? Or he's not familiar with the law, v'amar shvitati bimkomi, and he says that my Shabbos residence is going to be in the place where I'm now, okay? Zachalo mikomo alpayam ama b'kol ruach. Okay? He merits having 2,000 amma in any direction. Okay? Agulot divrei Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus. Okay? And so, according to Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, the tchum, okay, is the radius, no, I'm sorry, it's the circumference of a circle. Okay? So that's his area. The Chachamim omrim, but the sages disagree, and they say merubaot. No, they say the area is considered like a square and not like a circle, which allows then the person, okay, to go in any direction, not just north, south, east, and west, but even to the corners. Okay? Kitavla merubat, like a square tablet. Okay? Think of, right? Kadei shehiyeh nishkar l'zaviot, so that he will be rewarded by being able to go into the corners. V'zohi she'amru, and this is what we mean when we say as follows: He'ani me'arev biraglav, that a poor person can establish a eruv with his presence. Amar Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Meir, Anu ein lanu ela ani. According to Rabbi Meir, we say this law only applies to a poor person. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, according to Rabbi Yehuda, echad ani ve'echad ashir. One, the same applies to a poor person, applies to a rich person. Lo omru ma'arvin b'pat, ela lahakel al ha'ashir, shelo yitzeh v'ya'arev b'raglav. And that the rabbi said it's acceptable to establish an eruv using bread only to make it easier for a richer person so that they don't have to go out and travel the area in person, okay, and make it the eruv with their physical presence. Okay, let's go on now. Gemara. So the Gemara asks a question, coming back on our earlier statement in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah, right, there said, remember, that if he knew this landmark, and he says, that's going to be my Shabbos domicile, it's as if he said nothing. Okay? So the Gemara is going to initially ask about that. Ma'i lo amar klum. What does it mean when it says that in the Mishnah, that it's like he said nothing? Amar Rav, says Rav, lo amar klum kol ikar. It's as if he never said, never clearly, completely designated an adequate location for his Shabbos residence. That's how I'm going to suggest we understand it. Okay? The afilu letachtav shel ilan lo matze azil. That even to beneath the tree, he's not able to go. He can't travel to that. Shmuel amar lo amar klum leveito. And Shmuel understands the Mishnah is that he didn't say anything in regards his house. Aval letachtav shel ilan, but in terms of going beneath the tree, matzi azil v'ne'aseh tachtav shel ilan chamar gamal. Okay, that we do find he is able to go and then make the area underneath the tree his Shabbos domicile, like a chamar gamal, like a camel driver or a donkey driver. In other words, back and forth. What do we mean by that? Ba limdod min hatzafon, modadin lo min hadarom. whatever the measurement is from the north, we measure equal from the south. Balim dod midarom, if he's measuring from the south, modadim lo midsafon. Likewise, we measure for him from the north. Okay? So in other words, okay, he has that Shabbos residence, but his 2,000 amos, okay, is that what's directed in either direction. Okay, let's go on a bit. All right, guys, we got a couple more minutes. All right, so this would be Nun, okay, would be the page for tomorrow, for Yom Kippur. Amar Rava, says Rava, Mai Tama de Rav. What's Rav's reasoning, okay, regarding this ruling of residence under the tree? Mishum de lo Messiahim atre, because he didn't clearly designate, didn't clearly define his place. Ve'ika da Amri, but there are others who explain Rabba's reason differently. Amar Rabba ma'itama de Rav, that Rabba said, what's the reasoning of Rav? Mishum de kasavar, kol she'eno bazeh achar zeh. Okay, namely that which cannot be done one after the other consecutively. Afilu bevat achat eno, cannot be done simultaneously. In other words, you can't designate both sides of the tree, okay, as your Shabbos residence. You can either designate one side or you can designate the other side, okay? But that's assuming for the moment that the entire area under the tree is only 8 amos, okay? If it's more than 8 amos, what's the situation? If it's less than 8 amos, what's the situation? Okay. So the Gemara asks, Mai benayu, what's the difference between these two possible explanations by Rabbah of Rav's view? Okay. Ika benayu, there is a difference between them. De Amar likno li ba'arba amot migo shmona, that he says, I'm acquiring 4 amot out of 8, right? Man de amar mishum delo messiahim atre, according to the one who said that the explanation is that he hasn't clearly defined his space. Ha lo messiahim atre. Okay. He didn't define his space. He doesn't say, right, if it's 8 amos under the tree, he didn't say whether he was on, let's say, the nearest side of the tree or the farther side of the tree. Okay? Uman da amar mishum kol she'eno bazeh achar zeh. And the one who said the rationale was because you can't do it consecutively and thus also can't do it simultaneously. Afilu bavat echat eno, hai ka'arba amot dami. This is just like 4 amos. The hacha arba amot kama. Because here we were saying that you have to have 4 amot. And we have not said which 4 amot, again, is the closer or the farther of the 8. Okay? Because you can only designate one of them. Okay? So therefore, the question is, okay, is that effective? All right. It could be because he said 4 amot. So certainly 4 amot are considered valid within 8. Okay. So now the Gemara wants to come back and examine the case in more detail. Gufa, let's come back. Amar Rabba, says Rabba, Kol davar she'eno bazeh achar zeh, any situation where we try to do something consecutively, va'afilu bavat echat eno, and you cannot do it, can't take effect simultaneously. Eat teva, eat, I'm sorry, right? So we'll go on now. A challenge, right? Okay. Itebe Abai Laraba. So Abai raises the following challenge. First challenge raised by Abai. Let's take an example, he says. Harmarbe b'ma'asrot. Okay, one who is supposed to be giving tithes, and he gives more than the 1/10 that's required. Okay, perutav metukamin. His produce is considered prepared. In other words, he has fulfilled the requirement of tithing his produce. Umasrotav mekukalim. But the tithes it themselves is no good. Amai, why? Lema kol she'eno bazeh achar zeh afilu bevat echad eno. Because you might say then that in trying to do two tenths, okay, can't do it consecutively, and he can't do it simultaneously. Okay, so the Gemara's answer is that's not a good challenge, Abaye. Why? Shani ma'aser de'ite lechatzaim. Because it's different with regards to tithing, because tithing can be done in half portions. So I could have said, yes, sure, I designated 2/10, but I was only designating half a kernel of each grain. So ultimately, I have 1/10 that was designated. Okay, namely, the amar tigdosh palga, because if you were to say, I only consecrate half, palga dechitata kadsha, half then of each grain, okay, is considered consecrated. V'harei ma'ah, okay, so that ends that issue. Abai now tries to bring a second challenge. V'harei ma'aser behema. So let's take the example of tithing animals where there are no halves. Okay, you can't give half an animal. So again, Rabbah comes back with an answer. V'amar Rabbah, yatsu shnayim ba'asiri. Let's say it's a situation where two animals came out of the pen at the same time and were counted as number 10. V'kara'an asiri, and he called them 10. Therefore, in that situation, asiri ve'echad asar mu'uravin zeh bazeh. Then the 10th and the 11th are really mixed together. Okay? Shani ma'aser behema. No, we can't use that as a challenge because, again, tithing of animals, okay, is different. The ite bazeh achar zeh b'ta'ut, because we have examples where you could say one consecutively after another could occur by mistake. As we learned at Tnan elsewhere in a Mishnah, kara l'chi'i asiri, if the person counted the 9th one as number 10, ula asiri chi'i, and then he counted the 10th one as number 9, ula echad asar asiri, and therefore when the 11th one came out, he counted that one as the 10th. What happens? Shloshtan mikudashim. Then all three of those animals are considered consecrated. Okay? So we can't use that as a challenge. Let's take another attempt at a challenge. V'harei todah. Think of the Thanksgiving offering, where we had the offering plus 40 loaves of bread, okay, that were presented with the offering, right? Delite b'ta'ut, where there's no possibility of error there. Velite b'zeh achar zeh, And there's also no possibility of trying to do something consecutively or simultaneously. Ve'itmar, and it was said about this, Toda shenishchata al shmonim chalot, if you had the Toda offering that was made, okay, on 80 loaves, Chizkiah Amar Kedshu Allah Arba'im Mitoch Shmanim. According to Chizkiah, 40 out of the 80 loaves are considered sanctified, valid. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lo Kedshu Allah Arba'im Mitoch Shmanim. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees and says you did not even consecrate 40 out of the 80 loaves. Ha'itmar Allah. And here on this, the following was said. Amar Rabbi Zera, says Rabbi Zera, Hakol Modim. Everybody is in agreement, namely both Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. Heiche de Amar likadsho arba'im mitoch shmanim dekadshe. That where he specifically said, let 40 out of the 80 be sanctified, right? Lo kadshu arba'im, ela im kain kadshu shmonim. Okay, they are not to be sanctified unless all 80 are to be considered sanctified. Kuli alma lo plige de lo kadshu. Okay, everybody who they don't disagree unless they're all sanctified. Ki plige, where do they disagree? Bistama. Okay, where there's no stipulation. Mar savar la'achrayut kamechave. One master, Chizkiah, holds that he was responsible. He was trying to be responsible, that if there was something wrong with the first among any of the 40, he's got the other 40 that can fill in, and therefore that's the situation. Kamechave, that was his intent. V'al t'nai i'tainhu, and therefore that was his really a stipulation, right? Umar savar, and the other, however, felt the korban gadol kamechave, that he really was trying to simply bring a larger, greater korban, and that was the situation. Okay, and we're going to stop right there, okay, for today, guys, right? Because then we come back to the example of the tree, to that to finish up, and that will give you just Nun Amud Beis to deal with on Yom Kippur, okay, which is, it's pretty straightforward, and then we'll pick up, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, guys.
Thank you. Have a good
Mark Hasimatova.
Mark,
everyone.
have an easy fast.